I would also like to introduce Suresh Kumar, my right-hand man, who is the Director of our Professional Services. He will be presenting the demo portion of the presentation and actually showing you the tool set along with walking you through the converted notes application. He's a great resource as he's been at many of our customer sites and in understanding their environment and how our tool set impacts and helps assist with these migration projects. Suresh? First, a little bit about Unify. We are based in sunny Roseville, California. We have offices, as you can see, all over the world and have a presence in over 50 countries. We are a publicly traded software company that has a 29-year history, which includes being the first company to deliver a relational database in the Unix environment back in the 80s. Suresh? Today, we've built a growing portfolio focused on helping customers modernize their legacy applications, which helps maximize their existing investments and support rapid adoption of the new target platform. That's from Oracle Forms and Lotus Notes to archiving and content. With Access One, for instance, Unify now has an email messaging solution which allows organizations to set up an Outlook environment in a fraction of the time of your typical email migration with 100% fidelity. Today, though, we will be focused solely on the Composer for Lotus Notes solution. So now let's look at why companies are looking at migrating their Lotus Notes applications. Suresh? So what are the drivers behind migrating Notes applications? In many cases, organizations have made strategic decisions to go with .NET or Java as the platform for all application development. CIOs are looking to reduce the cost of maintaining infrastructure for multiple platforms or systems for application development. Also, it has been said that Notes developers aren't getting any younger. The workforce coming out of the education system today is not taught or proficient in Notes. Also, although Notes is a great platform for business users to develop applications in a graphical environment, it doesn't easily integrate with other enterprise systems. Today, leading companies are embracing service-oriented architecture as an integration standard. Suresh? Companies often have hundreds or even thousands of Notes applications that range from discussion databases to custom complex business applications. After organizations take inventory of their Notes environments and after removing duplicates, apps no longer in use, are left with a more manageable number of applications that they need to migrate. Then they assess what their options are for each application. Now, we have found that the 5 options above are what customers are considering. Retire them, replace the applications with a packaged app, rewrite them, do nothing, leave them where they're at, and migrate. Now, Unify focuses solely on the last category, migration. The applications that are running your business today are what make you unique and give you your business advantage. We want to leverage the applications that you've already invested your time and money in. We believe that migrating an application will provide your organization the ability to preserve critical business functionality at a lower risk and cost. So now let's look at why companies are looking to leverage migration tools to assist in their migration efforts. Suresh? Excuse me. What we've heard in the market while engaging with partners and organizations are they're looking for ways to reduce cost and risk, like I mentioned before. They want a methodology and a tool set they can understand and implement into their environment by leveraging their existing resources. And then third, while partners and organizations are looking to migrate their applications quickly, they also want to do it in a way that minimizes the disruption and impact to the business. Suresh? Part of the strength of the Composer solution is our methodology and approach to migrating Lotus Notes applications. I'm not going to go into detail of the whole slide because it's pretty busy, but I wanted to point out a couple key aspects of our methodology. Our 5-phase approach can really be broken up into 3 groupings. The first one, which is phase 1, is the application analysis. Now, this is the step in understanding what needs to be migrated and what doesn't, along with which platform each of the applications should be targeted to. Now, this is critical in understanding the time and cost of your overall migration, and also the cost of migrating, an individual application. The second phase, which is 2, 3, and 4, is really your migration phase. So this is where you actually perform the actual migration, which includes testing, QA, and implementation. And then the last phase, or the 5th phase, is application optimization. So after you perform the migration, this is where organizations can enhance or modify the migrated applications to meet their current business needs. Suresh? So the Composer for Lotus Notes solution assists all phases of the migration process. So our application analysis tools helps you understand what needs to be migrated along with the complexity of each of your applications, and then it will show you and help you understand how much effort is going to take to migrate them. Secondly, our application converter will then convert the applications quickly along with all the associated business logic. Now, this is important too because this is one of our differentiators. We are the only company that has the ability to migrate and convert the business logic. And then lastly, our management tools, which will bring overall the security and production data which will enable you to implement your applications. So that was kind of a brief, quick overview. Now what I'd like to do is turn it over to Suresh, and he's going to walk you through how we classify Notes applications, and then show you actually the Composer tool set. So Suresh, with that, over to you.
Thanks, Cleet. Like Cleet mentioned, what I'll be going through today is a quick overview of the tools that is currently available from Unify for these migrations, and showing you some of the demonstrations of these migrations using Visual Studio. So before we start, we have been performing these migrations over the past 2.5 years, and we've gathered a lot of real-world knowledge as we have delivered quite a few migrations for a large number of customers for these Lotus Notes applications. And typically, the approaches and the methodology that we follow in moving these applications are tested over this past 2.5 years, and it is kind of a proven methodology that we like to call it for our tool set. So customers and partners could always utilize some of the knowledge base and the expertise that we have actually gained using our tools, and perform these migrations if they choose to using our tool set that we provide. So before we start looking at the portfolio of the various tools that are provided by Unify, let's review the classifications of these Notes applications. It's important to review this so that you can get a much better idea as to, from Unify's standpoint, the kind of applications that we consider for migration using our tool set. So if you are looking at these classifications here on the screen, you have data-centric and process-centric applications. What do they mean? Applications that primarily focus on collecting and sharing data. So you will find within your Notes environments, there are quite a few of those kind of applications. There's no workflow, there's no connectivity that's actually tied to these applications. And these are relatively straightforward, from a migration standpoint. Then you have your process-centric applications. These are that incorporate, workflow, that have a lot of back-end connectivity, that tie to other databases, for lookup information. And these can be, complex because there's a lot of business logic that's actually written to actually perform the transactions that the business user needs to within these applications. Now, if you look at two other quadrants of these classifications, you have your template-based and your custom design. So the template-based ones are typically the out-of-the-box, not much of work involved in actually setting up these databases within your environment. These are what we call the Nifty 50 templates that you typically get out of IBM for these migrations. That can be a classification that you could categorize these applications within your Notes environment. Then you have your custom design ones. These are the ones that are developed by your Notes group within the enterprise for your business users to handle business processes. These have a lot of custom design that is tied to it. There's no standard templates that are used, and it's typically not used for simple applications like your data storage and things like that. So if you combine all these four various quadrants, so here's an example of typical layout of the Notes environment within your enterprise. So you typically have your data-driven template-based, like your category quadrant ones, which include things like your domino discussions, your names, logs. Then you have your process-driven templates like your document libraries, your team rooms, quick places. These are things that come out of the box that could be customized for your environment for usage. Then you have your data-driven custom, which are typically data entry kind of applications that can be developed quickly for business users to use. And then you have your quadrant 4 applications. These are your custom process-driven applications that are, your complex applications within the environment. So if you look at these four quadrants, typical solutions that are offered by other vendors focus on the 1, 2, and 3, where you could directly transfer those applications into SharePoint and don't have to worry about the business logic that's in there, and the user interface can be adapted to the new UI that SharePoint provides for some of the forms and things like that. But then what about your quadrant 4 applications? There has to be a lot of decisions that will have to be made from a management perspective, with regards to migration of these applications. Because these applications, could be a very small number when you actually look at, go through an assessment process within your Lotus Notes platform. You could actually figure out that, there's only a very limited number of applications that are really high value from a migration standpoint, which are very small in number, that have a lot of business logic that's been written over the years. And, they sometimes can actually be made to fit a Notes environment. In those cases, those could be typically ignored from a migration standpoint. And some of them could be a rewrite solution, because the business processes might have changed over the years, and you would want to start over. In those cases, you would embark on a rewrite project for some of those. But then for a small number of these quadrant 4 applications, you might also consider things like decoupling your data store from the application, so that you could get the data out of these applications and rewrite your user interface or whatever in the new environment. So some of the key factors from Unified standpoint that we have seen that are critical to moving these quadrant 4 applications to the Microsoft platform are related to these. So these could include your business logic, like I was mentioning, your formula and Lotus script that's part of these applications, a lot of rules that have been defined. You don't want to rewrite a requirements doc for these applications from a rewrite strategy standpoint, because as all of you know, that it's going to take a lot of time and effort to actually build some of those documents and get through the whole process of a rewrite project. And then there is the whole thing about, with regards to document data. So there's a lot of data within these applications. There's a lot of rich text, and some of these can also have some complex user interface components in it that's been built on the Lotus Notes environment. So how do you deal with those? Then there's this whole concept of access control. How do you handle the security that's currently within your Notes environment, moving it to a Microsoft platform? How do you manage the heights winds? How do you manage the navigation controls based on heights winds and all that that needs to be considered critical factors to migrations. Now, Unify, from a migration standpoint for these complex applications, back to Cleet's point of what we provide. So based on the methodology that we have developed over the past few years here, we actually provide solutions and tools and utilities in each of these phases. So you can actually have access to the analyzer, which we provide, that actually allows you to do a pricing exercise for these migrations. Because it is very difficult to actually put a cost to migration without actually knowing what needs to be done. So we have actually developed some tools and knowledge base around how to price these migrations using our analyzer. Then you have your application migration tools, which are basically your converters. These are Visual Studio templates that we offer that you could utilize using a Visual Studio development environment by your ASP.NET developers for running the Notes NSF through for migrations. Then you also have a lot of these management tools like Cleet was mentioning that will help you get through some of the other common problems with regards to the Notes migration effort, mostly relating to how do you handle security, how do you deal with data, moving production data into a migrated app, how do you deal with those? So we have tools around those to deal with those kind of situations, to handle security, for handling data pump. And then we also have some additional deployment utilities that will help you deal with names resolution, because like all of you know, Notes typically has your names data that is actually embedded as part of the document data that needs to be translated into the new AD environment lookups and stuff. So we actually have some applications that we have developed that will help you do that mapping into the AD environment once you finish the migration. And then the last piece would be once you have migrated the applications, how would you get a SharePoint interface into it? So we actually provide you with a SharePoint installer that will help you install this site template that will allow you to deploy these migrated ASP.NET apps as web parts into SharePoint. So with regards to the demonstration today, what I'll be showing is, obviously the Composer Converter, showing you how the like-for-like migration is going to occur. You will also see how the business logic is retained, because we actually migrate the existing Lotus script and formula into C# as part of this migration using the converter. And then you will also see the document data migrated into a SQL Server repository. You have options to move it to SQL Server or Oracle from a staging standpoint of this document data. We will showcase that also as part of the demonstration today. And then obviously the analyzer, we will touch upon the pricing models that we have come up with that will help you determine a cost to migrations, because these migration projects will not start until there is enough cost justification as to how these tools can actually assist you in these migrations. So there is a pricing model exercise that I will showcase as part of this demonstration today, and then obviously the other utilities and tools around the ACL Manager, Data Pump, and Names Resolver. So just give me a minute here as I share my Visual Studio environment. So before I do that, let me go ahead and showcase the database that I will be migrating using Visual Studio here, just to give you a feel of the nature of applications that is typically addressed as part of Composer for Lotus Notes. So here is a quick little application that you can actually see on your screens. Typical application has outlines, and has sometimes these can be actually frame sets that have navigational controls built in, allowing the end user to navigate through these applications. There's the document data that actually allows the user to double-click and from the views look up the actual documents. There is a good user interface that we have built on this particular sample here that actually showcases tabs and then sections, so you can actually see that. You have a rich text field with some attachments. There is the action bars allowing you to get through the various form level security that's in here, and also with regards to lookups, there's all these dialog lists that actually come up, allowing the user to interact with this particular form and then submit it through some workflow related activities as part of this application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this application right now and then go into Visual Studio and go through the process of if you are using this Composer for Lotus Notes Converter tool, what a typical NSF migration will look like, because that's something that has to be demonstrated from Unify's perspective, because showcasing how this is actually evolved as a tool currently, because previously it used to be a services engagement that Unify used to perform from a migration standpoint, and right now we actually license this particular tool for customers to use for migrations. So before I start the migration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a test database that is, in this case, I'm actually using SQL Server, allowing you to transfer the data from the migrated app into this particular SQL Server repository. So I'm going to call it test webinar, and it's just going to use the standard Windows authentication on my server here. So it is a empty database with no tables at this point. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio here and start my wizard process. So I'm going to create a new website. And at this point, what it's going to do is it's going to bring up the already installed template that we, going through the installation process, installs it for your Visual Studio development environment. I'm going to click on OK. And at this point, I'm going to say I'm going to use this training database that I want to use for the migration. So there are a lot of options in here that will allow you to filter out or specify some of the characteristics of the generated code from a migration standpoint. So you have the option to import data as part of the migration, because if you choose to get a sample set, you can always choose first 100 records for each of the tables that are being created, so that you're not bringing in gigs of data as part of the first migration effort. You also have the capability to actually externalize strings. This is mostly for localization purposes, especially if you're utilizing these applications, this tool set to migrate, applications, and that might be written in Japanese and things like that. So any localization, we do support all that as part of our migration. Then you also have the capability to actually normalize multi-valued fields. That's pretty common as part of your Notes applications, where you have a lot of multi-valued fields, and if you're moving into a relational structure, you would want to separate out all that data into one-to-many kind of a relationship for tables that are being created, so that you could utilize some of the BI solutions that is within the marketplace for you to use this data for reporting purposes. So let's go ahead and choose, the default that's in here, and this is what I was mentioning about, the data types that we, databases that we support for the migration of the document data. So right now I'm going to go ahead and choose SQL, and I'm going to say that the name of the database is test webinar, like we created in SQL Server. You have the option to enable full text indexing as part of this migration. What it will do is it will actually create the full text catalogs as part of SQL Server, enabling you to do searches within your applications, and we do support full search capability like you have in your Notes. but with a different UI as part of the migrated applications. So the full text option is actually enabled for you to do some of that full text searches within your application. So at this point, I'm just going to click on test and click on finish. At this point, what we are doing is we are actually reviewing, analyzing the Notes NSF and using the DSL capabilities, going to go through and perform the migration. So this is going to take a couple of minutes here as it's going through the various Notes objects. And this is an important thing to note here. From a framework standpoint, the solution is a .NET 2.0. And I'm just going to click no here so that I don't generate a 3.5 solution. We don't anticipate any kind of issues, but since our product is tested on 2.0, that's what we certify. So like you can see, the template actually starts generating the website solution for you in Visual Studio, and at the bottom left-hand corner, you're actually seeing various objects being read as part of the DSL file XML format of the Notes NSF that it is trying to analyze and read through. So at this point, you can actually see on the right side of the screen on the Solution Explorer as it's actually refreshing your object list within the Visual Studio solution. So let's give it a minute here and wait for this process to complete, and then I'll walk you through the next steps on the migration. So as it's creating the various tables within SQL Server, we actually follow certain rules in how we determine what the table structures need to be, and how forms get translated into tables and all that. So just give me a minute here, and once the process is finished here, I will go to SQL Server and show you the various repository tables that have been created as part of this process. And as you can see on the screen, it is actually at this point importing data for this particular database, and there's about 264 records that is being imported into SQL Server right now. Great. So once the migration is done, you will actually get a message from the wizard process actually indicating what the status of the migration is. So obviously, if there are certain to-dos, so these are what we refer to as to-do commands within the generated code, allowing you to look at the pieces of code that are not migrated from an automatic standpoint. So these might be certain things that from a code generation standpoint we have left for the developers to manually address as part of the migration. So this particular application had certain to-dos to do with, and you have the option to just directly go to the task list and see the list of to-dos from a migration standpoint. So it kind of gives you a quick indication from a code conversion standpoint, what to look for immediately if you're the developer. So now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build this solution and see if I run into any kind of compile errors, because there might be certain scenarios where there might be compile errors that are generated due to certain issues with the code that's been generated. So these are common from a code generation standpoint, because there might be certain scenarios that might be leading up to these compilers, which can be very well addressed in the converted code by the developers, because these are all now C# ASP.NET applications, and it will be very easy for developers to address these to-do codes from a migration standpoint. So I'm just going to go ahead and double-click on this compiler that I saw, and the reason for this particular error in this particular sample is because there was already an object that was named frmnje, and then there was a variable name that was actually named frmnje. So I'm going to go ahead and change it to frmnje1 and go ahead and close this application and rebuild at this point and see if it finishes the rebuild process. So since there was no other errors, I anticipate this process to go through fine. And once that's done, here we go. So it's all succeeded. And before I get into the various pieces of this solution file here, I know that what particular view to look at to see if the migration has gone through fine. So I'm going to go ahead and click View in Browser here for this particular solution. And since Visual Studio provides you with an inbuilt application server for you to bring up the application, it's very easy to just run it through the tools, see how the application comes up, and then address any kind of to-dos or any other manual migration tasks that you need to handle as part of the migration. So here's the migrated application in ASP.NET. So like you can see, we actually maintain a very like-for-like behavior from a migration standpoint of the user interface. We do bring across, we do have support for all the outline items coming across as part of the migration. We do support all your different styles of views from a hierarchical to categorized to flat views. We do support all that. We actually also bring across all the data. So if I double click on this particular document here, you will actually see this particular document had tabs, and like you can see, the user interface is exactly the same as you had in your Notes application. So if you keep both these applications side by side, it's very difficult for the end user to actually determine if it's actually running off a browser or if it's running off a client. One of the key advantages of us moving these applications in a like-for-like manner is for this purpose of reducing the retraining costs of these application user base, because those can actually be pretty enormous if you look at a migration rollout standpoint, what might be involved in doing that. And you can actually see the rich text fields have been migrated with the actual attachments themselves, so that you're not losing any data, you're not losing any user interface, you're not losing any of the business logic that's actually driving these applications through the processes of the workflow that have been defined, because these are all C# code now allowing you to do that from a end user standpoint. So from a developer standpoint, you get your entire you get to start at a level where you are bringing across all the existing business logic. You don't really have to go through a requirements gathering process trying to determine how these applications really work from a rewrite strategy at this point. So it gives you a lot of advantages from a code conversion standpoint, what we do with the tool. Okay, and then we also do support rich text fields. And we actually utilize a lot of AJAX capabilities in the migrated solution, so that way the end user experience for using these applications after migration is very close to the kind of performance and the user interface that you had on the Notes side. So we do have support for all those kind of features that you have in Notes. The other thing that I want you to be aware of is also we do provide context-related out-of-the-box functionality for a lot of these options that you have, where you don't really have to write anything from scratch if you're using our tools to migrate these apps. So these will allow you to streamline what actually gets translated from a agent perspective, the create functionality from within toolbars. So these are things that you typically see as part of the Notes toolbars, that the end users are used to for using these applications. Now let me get back into the solution itself and then show you, from a code conversion standpoint, like you can actually see the structure is actually streamlined and is very similar to what you have in a Notes development environment, in classification of the various objects being put into its own folders for easy management of the code. So you can actually see we actually have views here that have been migrated, subforms, the services. These are things that we provide in addition to what's there from a straight one-to-one migration. So we do support the full enablement of web services of all the migrated views from a data viewing capability, data selection capability that's out of the box. So you actually have web services that you get out of the migrated tool that you can utilize for utilizing this functionality if you are rolling out these applications within your enterprise and you want other applications in your .NET or Java world to actually interact with the business logic that's been migrated as part of this migration. And you also have agents. So we do migrate all the agents, be it your manual menu agents, your scheduled agents, and all that that is within your agents objects within the Notes database. So from a scheduling standpoint, we actually utilize and provide you with a utility called the Run Agent utility that will allow you to, once you compile these applications and get these applications tested and ready to go, generate Windows tasks for all the scheduled agents so that you can utilize the existing scheduling capabilities that are already defined and brought across as part of the migration, so that your AD environment security is looked for to make sure that certain agents can be run as certain users and all that. And then you have full support for the various tasks and everything else based on either weekly runs, daily runs, all those kind of support that you have within the migrated applications. Now, from a forms migration standpoint, if I'm looking at the main form, you have your class structure, your metadata class that actually has all the various components of the data from a documents perspective. And then you have your manager class, which is typically referred to as mostly like your code behind class that actually has all the business logic that is actually migrated. You will actually notice that we bring across a lot of the comments that is actually part of your existing code base within Notes. And we have support for all the add functions from within Notes. So if a developer is actually looking at the migrated code, they'll be able to easily do a one-to-one mapping of the existing code to the generated code to see how the new code looks like and how it's being migrated. So now let's touch upon some of the other tools also that I wanted to showcase as part of this webinar here. Some of the maintenance tools that we allow you to look at is, here's an example of the ACL Manager. This is a tool that will allow you to, so if I look at and point to the application that we just migrated, it will allow you to manage the security that's been migrated as part of the existing, so if you look at the security that's been migrated in the Visual Studio solution, you'll actually see an XML file that actually represents your ACL that's been brought over. So, since AD doesn't have the concept of application roles, what it typically has is your users and groups. So what we do is we actually create an XML that using a component library that we provide sources for as part of the solution to you. It actually knows how to integrate the security based on the users that are actually logged into these applications. It's very easy to use this tool to manage the security settings within that particular XML file so that you don't really have to edit an XML file using hand. You would rather have a visual interface to interact with this particular. So you have the option to add members, edit members, remove members, and also have the concept of adding roles and stuff. So adding members, you could actually connect directly to LDAP settings if you choose to do that. That way you could actually use this tool also as a LDAP viewer. That way you could use it as a client and interact with your AD provider to bring in names and stuff for this particular XML. And then as soon as you're done, if you save it back, it'll save it back into the Visual Studio solution for you to then compile and republish this particular application. The next tool that I wanted to showcase here is your data importer. So here is where you have the option to directly point to the database that you just migrated and refresh the data. So we provide you with a lot of filtering options on the document data that is actually been brought over as part of your test migration. And then if you decide to move it into a test environment, with production data, you can actually point it to the production NSF and then pull the data into the structures that has been created in SQL Server so that you can actually refresh the data without actually going through a full-fledged process of migration all over again. So that's the intention of this. So, you could actually provide that and provide the location of the repository where you want the data to be put back into so that you could actually do that. Now, the third tool that I wanted to touch upon was the names resolver, which is very key from a migration standpoint. But before that, what I also wanted to show you is the SQL Server structures that have been created. So we have all these various tables that are created, and anything relating to Composer, which is internal to Unify, is all named as Composer and then the name of the table. But then all the forms do get their names from the aliases that have been defined for the forms in Lotus Notes. And you will actually see that we have full support for readers, authors, fields and names fields for the actual data that's actually brought across as part of the data migration also. So the structures of these tables are purely dependent on some of the document layouts within your notes forms. And also from a Composer values table, this is where all your multi-valued field information is actually stored. And the other important thing to also note here from a structure standpoint is with regards to the Composer attachments. Remember the Notes Excel spreadsheet that I was showing that got migrated? So all your attachments are actually put into the blobs table and separated out from a migration standpoint so that you don't really have to search through the existing structures of the forms table that has been created. Rather, you can actually go against what we call a Composer attachments table where all the attachments are stored, and then you have a tie back into the actual notes ID, which we always retain from a data migration standpoint, so that you could actually do some sanity checks on the actual data that's actually migrated, pointing it to the notes ID on notes data, and then pointing it also to the relational structure SQL data pointing to the notes ID. So that way you could actually compare and contrast what the data is and how the data has been translated into the new structure. Now let's look at this other important thing from a migration standpoint. Typically your names data is always stored either as part of names field or it could also be part of the readers or authors fields from a migration standpoint. And then it is very important to actually clean up the names data before the application gets into production, because sometimes what will happen is the names data that's within notes is not in the same format as it is within an AD environment. So in those cases, what we have done is we have actually provided a application that will allow you to point to a XML structure that is going to be defined purely by your developers from the notes address book, that actually signifies your canonical names, the abbreviated names, the common names, and a common key that actually ties this particular document record between your notes address book and an AD environment. So that way, when we run this application, you could actually do a quick mapping into your notes into your AD environment, and based on this common key of information that actually ties the notes address book employee to the AD employee record, we could actually, based on this particular reference here, perform the search and do the mappings and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and look up an application that I have published, and at that point it's going to go ahead and load all the various form information from that particular application, and it's going to say this particular form is what I want to look up all this names data for. You have the option to do a dry run where if I just say go ahead and try to resolve, it'll actually go through and find out all the various fields within that particular form where there is names data that needs to be addressed, and it gives you a quick analysis of how many documents were processed, how many names were processed, how many of them were resolved, and how many did not. So this gives you a quick indication of the various kinds of names data that is actually brought across and that are unresolved. So it kind of gives you a quick checklist of what you need to do from a data sanity standpoint of the names data in the migrated environment. So we actually provide you with this web application also as part of one of our utilities for when you sign up to get the tool so that you could actually run this within your environment. And then in this case, you can actually see it has actually brought the entire Unify AD information here based on my Windows authentication, and then you can always change the web config settings within the migrated applications so that it will go against that particular AD provider. So this is also a very important tool that we have seen based on our experience, what needs to be done from a data cleanup of the names data of the migrated document data for the applications. And the last piece of tool that I would want to showcase today is with regards to the whole migration costing exercise. What would you do to actually determine the cost of migration for these Notes applications? So we have our analyzer tool that will help you do this exercise, and it provides you the options to either open the Notes databases one by one to perform this operation, or to actually analyze a folder where you have all these databases that I want to analyze, and then as it's going through that process, just give it a minute and then I'll get back into the Excel spreadsheet that actually allows you to pick data from the generated outputs from this particular process here, and then plug it into an Excel model that we have created, allowing you to perform costing exercises for the migration. So at this point, using the analyzer, I've kind of analyzed 4 different databases, and what it does is actually creates, like you can see, a summary sheet that will give you a object count summary for every database that was actually analyzed. It gives you a quick indication of the kind of external dependency that these applications have from a migration standpoint. From dependent database standpoint. It also gives you from a tool perspective, what is not supported as part of the tool, giving you a good indication of the kind of to-dos that you will actually encounter from a migration standpoint. So it's kind of a good quick summary of all the 4 databases that we have actually looked at from the analyzer. Now, if you look at this composer.csv file. Here is, so I'm going to close this analyzer here and show you the kind of data that gets generated into an Excel spreadsheet here. And I'm going to go ahead and select these 4 databases from Excel and plug it into a sample tools pricing modeling worksheet that we have developed over the years here, and that we typically use for a lot of pricing on our end, which we also provide to you if you buy the tool. So it kind of gives you a good indication of what might be involved in actually performing these migrations. So the basis of the pricing of these Notes applications here is based on certain estimates that we have determined. These are some samples here, but these could be adjusted to how you would change based on your developer expertise within your organization that is going to be performing these migrations. So you have the option to actually change any of this information here, provide percentages of how much percentage of time you would be spending on the QA, the project management, the enterprise integration. and also from a per form, per subform, script library, view, navigator, a JavaScript includes @db lookup standpoint, and how much it's going to take for you to actually migrate a specific object within the the migration project. And then you could specify cost and specify how many resources are going to be there. So it kind of gives you, the resource allocations and the capacity of what you might need to get these migrations done from a costing standpoint. And at this point, since I've already cut and pasted all that information here, I go into the output, and it actually is telling me that these applications have been rated, in a specific way. There are certain rating charts that we actually utilize, and these are all based on certain standards that are there in the market, from a DEI, element index, and complexity index, measurements that we have built over the years that we utilize to rate these applications. And this is kind of a sample of what you would get utilizing our pricing models for these migrations. And then you could also see a summary of the effort involved based on resources. It's going to take you 6 weeks to finish these 4 databases from a migration standpoint. So it kind of gives you a quick indication of a migration cost perspective, what it might take using our analyzer. So there are a lot of tools in the market for analysis, but then most of those are typically used for platform assessment, doing inventories, looking up how many databases are there, doing platform targetings. But once you target the platforms to ASP.NET, you can actually utilize our tool to get a pricing of what it would take to migrate those applications to ASP.NET. And that is what we do from an analysis standpoint. And these are all tools that are available as part of our suite of tools that we provide, as part of the toolkit that we have provided for Notes migrations. And the last piece of information that I want to share with you is, we have seen this question come up over and over again as to how do you guys support migration of these applications, complex applications, into SharePoint. And what I would want to share here is, from a migration to SharePoint standpoint, what we offer is integrating these generated ASP.NET solutions as web parts into SharePoint. So I'm going to show you a quickly deployed application that you saw migrated into SharePoint here. And I'm not going to go through the process of actually showing you how it is actually deployed, because we actually have tools that will allow you to do that deployment. But once you do that deployment, here's how the application would look like in SharePoint. So it's basically a page viewer web part for every view, and you have the same kind of behavior that you have within the ASP.NET application that you also see in the SharePoint app. So kind of gives you a quick approach to getting these applications. If the users are used to a single point of entry of accessing these applications within SharePoint, you can actually deploy these migrated apps, using our solutions to SharePoint, and then proceed from there in actually enhancing these or managing these deployments. So, Keith?
Yep. Well, thanks, Suresh. So, part of the overall solution strategy, we do have some evaluation programs for partners and specific organizations that if the methodology and approach, it sounds like something that can benefit your organization in the direction that you're going, you can either go to our website and request an evaluation packet, and I can reach out to you and we can discuss, based on what you're trying to accomplish, what program would best fit your organization. Or I know many of you I've spoken to before, and you can reach out to me directly, or I can reach out and figure out what the best way to engage, and the next steps would be to look at the tool. So the next step, if you can switch, is get in the Q&A portion. So if you give us just 2 2 minutes and 2 seconds or 2 seconds and 10 seconds, to give us a little bit of time to gather up the questions. What we'll do is address them one by one. And if you have any questions right now that you have in regards to the presentation or how to get information, I will say one thing. We will post this presentation on our website. So if there's some people within your organization that didn't have a chance to look at this presentation, it will be accessible to you to look at a future date. So if you can just give us a couple seconds, we will gather the questions and then get back to you.
Great. Cleet, so I have a few
Adam?
questions. Yes,
Okay.
I have questions.
Great. So Stress will lead that, and we'll go from there.
Yes. So obviously the first question was related to, getting a copy of the presentations of today. We will do that, and it will be posted by end of the week on our archive webinar section for you to download and use. The second question is, does this tool allow to migrate to Java? At this point, all our migrations are to the Microsoft platform, and it's to C# and ASP.NET. The third question here is regarding SharePoint. Does the SharePoint application require a web part be deployed in the SharePoint environment? And the answer is yes. We actually do have a web part that you will need to be deploying as part of our SharePoint web part installer. The next one here is also a technical question around, what gets converted. Does the tool support configurable components in the conversion like config or profile documents? Can those be edited by mortals or is a developer required? We do support, the existing notes, profile docs and configuration mechanisms of, how you have defined that within the notes environment. So if there is any kind of user interfaces that have been built to actually integrate with those configuration components, those are all migrated as part of the migration. And there's another one here with regards to the tools that were shown today. Are all the tools provided to us, if we sign up for, the tool suite or portfolio of products that have been showcased today? Yes. In fact, you will be getting all the various tools and utilities that are shown today as part of the toolkit that is provided for migrations.